Hello and welcome to I Know Dino. I'm Garrett.
And I'm Sabrina.
And today, in our 456th episode, we have a bunch of news, including 2 new sauropods, as well as an update on Ubirajara, all coming from Sabrina. I'm not doing any news this week. We also have a special Dinosaur Connection Challenge about cabinets of curiosities brought to you by Exquisite Eons, which is really cool. We've been meaning to talk about cabinets of curiosities for a while because they're super interesting. They're sort of like the early precursors to today's natural history museums. And so some of them featured dinosaurs. Way before dinosaurs were even dinosaurs. We also have Dinosaur of the Day, Megapnosaurus, as well as a fun fact about dicraeosaurids, like a Margosaurus, with their cool neural spines. And other animals had them too, which is part of the fun fact.
So fun.
I think so. But before we get into all of that, of course, we want to thank some of our patrons for helping to keep our podcast running. And this week we're catching up with the patrons that we should have thanked a while ago. But
we blame COVID for that.
Yeah, I think this is the last time you'll hear us blame COVID, hopefully. These new patrons are Sonia, Lazy Dump Truck, Spinaloris, I really like that name, and Petter. Thank you all very much for joining.
Yay, thank you.
And then rounding out our shout-outs with our random drawing winners for this episode are Ellen, Tom, Geraldine, the Howard family, Othnelia, and Trev.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being Dino-It-Alls with us. We really, really appreciate you being part of our community. Jumping into the news, because it's all me this episode. Haha. We've got a couple of new sauropods, so what could be more exciting than that?
I don't know. I guess that explains why you're the one doing all the news. It's all new sauropods. Well, partly new sauropods.
I'll start with the titanosaur, Igai semkhu. This was published by Eric Gorskak and others in the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology, and it's open access if anybody wants to check it out. And what's really exciting about Igai is that it sheds light on dinosaurs that lived in the latest Cretaceous of what is now northern Africa. So it lived in the late Cretaceous in what is now the Karga Oasis in Egypt. And according to the authors, quote, the Campanian Maastrichtian dinosaur record of mainland Africa is exceptionally poor, with most discoveries consisting of isolated skeletal elements of often limited morphological and phylogenetic utility, end quote. They also said, quote, at present, the most complete and critically diagnostic dinosaur fossil that is unquestionably from the latest Cretaceous of mainland Africa is the holotype partial skeleton of the titanosaurian sauropod Mansurosaurus, end quote. But many of those bones are incomplete or deformed.
It's interesting that they consider Mansurosaurus, sort of leading into it as Mansurosaurus isn't that good, because when Mansurosaurus was found, it was way better than most of the stuff we have.
Yeah, and now we've got even better.
Nice.
Igai is the second titanosaur described from the latest Cretaceous of the Cassar Formation, and it helps show that there may have been a division of sauropods on the north and south of what is now Africa, and sauropods from northern Africa are more like Eurasian sauropods.
Oh, for once it kind of makes sense.
Yes. In terms of where they are geographically.
Yeah, that it was divided and they were close to the ones that were close.
So you could probably guess Igai lived around the same time and place as the titanosaur Mansurosaurus. Mansurosaurus, if that sounds familiar, it was named in 2018, which means we talked about it. And we talked about it in episode 167. Garrett, you mentioned having a pronounced chin. There's enough differences between the two titanosaurs to name this new species, Igai.
Oh, that's a new genus, too.
Yes. Good catch. Now, both are saltosaurids. Those are armored titanosaur sauropods, and that's a group that includes Alamosaurus. There's not many overlapping bones that have been found between Igai and Mansurosaurus, so that makes it a little bit hard to compare. But they were able to compare parts of the shoulder and foot. And based on that, Mansurosaurus was probably a stockier dinosaur because its humerus, its arm bone, was more robust compared to Igai's more gracile arm and leg bones. Igai, however, was slightly larger than the holotype of Mansurosaurus. Mansurosaurus was estimated to be about 26 to 33 feet or 8 to 10 meters long, whereas Igai, which is considered to be medium-sized, was estimated to be between 33 to 49 feet or 10 to 15 meters long. And that makes it similar in size to Diamantinosaurus.
Yeah, that's a decent size for a sauropod, 33 to 49 feet. Not super impressive.
Well, medium size is a decent size, I would say. All known titanosaurs from the Campanian Maastrichtian in what's now northern Africa were small to medium sized for sauropods. The holotype of Igai is 5 fragmentary vertebrae, part of the shoulder, part of the arm, part of the foot, part of the legs, and part of the pelvis, and it's mostly bones from its left side. There's fused vertebrae, so it was probably mature or a nearly mature individual when it died. Most elements, however, are incomplete and or distorted. The fossils were found in 1977, and they were recovered over a 3-day period. And then they were sent to Berlin in 27 plaster jackets and sat in collections for nearly 2 decades.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Although we've heard of much longer. Sometimes it's over 100 years.
That's true.
But still, 1977 is a long time, especially considering we don't have all that much material from those places.
Mm-hmm. The fossils have been reported in abstracts and in a thesis, but they weren't formally described before until this paper. The specimen, unfortunately, it was damaged while being excavated and prepared. The left tibia is missing, the shin bone, and, quote, more than 30 other elements that cannot currently be accounted for.
Oh, no, that's a lot.
Yeah. The authors also said, quote, they may have been unintentionally destroyed or lost in the field, in transit to Berlin, during scientific preparation, during transport between institutions, and or even during study, end quote. So it could have happened at any time.
Well, I kind of hope out of all those options, maybe if it was lost at another institution.
Could be found again.
Yeah, that someone finds the bones and they're like, I think I saw something like this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's also possible that there just wasn't enough storage for the bones in the collections.
Oh, so they just threw him away because they ran out of space. That's rough.
Something like that, yeah. It's really unclear what happened. But maybe we'll get lucky and you're right, and they just happen to be somewhere else, and someone just needs to figure out that they belong together.
Yeah, squirreled away in some other closet unaccounted for.
Mm-hmm. So Igai is a fragmentary skeleton, but it's, quote, currently the second most complete and informative, after the Mansurosaurus holotype, Campanian Maastrichtian dinosaur specimen from mainland Africa, end quote. So going back to what you're saying, like Mansurosaurus was a big deal, but it's not that complete. And they're saying this is also a big deal, even though it is less complete. But that just goes to show you how little we know about dinosaurs from this time and place.
Yeah, well, it sounds like maybe before it was more complete, and now it's less complete because we lost some bones.
Yeah. Again, the type species is Igai semkhu, and according to the paper, Igai is the name of the enigmatic Lord of the Oasis deity that was venerated by inhabitants of the Dakhla and Karga oases and surrounding regions in Egypt from roughly the Old Kingdom to the late period. And hopefully I am close to the right pronunciation here, but this is not my forte.
Yeah, it's Igai, and if you pronounce it in Latin, that's Igai. And sometimes we just default to Latin if we can't figure out how you'd say it in another language. Because I think in Egyptian, when it's I and then a consonant, you just pronounce it I. But then it seems like it would be Igai, and that doesn't seem right either. So I went with Igai.
Yes. As for the species name, the authors said that the species epithet semkhu is the perfect passive singular participle, the forgotten, of semke.
That's very specific.
Which is the ancient Egyptian verb to forget. So, collectively, the forgotten lord of the oasis.
Oh, it's just like a bledosaurus being the forgotten hadrosaur.
Oh, true.
You got 2 forgotten dinosaurs in a row.
So they say, quote, collectively, the forgotten lord of the oasis alludes to both the relatively recent emergence of latest Cretaceous non-marine vertebrate fossils from continental Africa, particularly Egypt, and the lengthy and complicated history of the holotypic specimen, end quote.
It's kind of similar too.
It's
got like a double meaning of they forgot about preparing these
Mhm.
with both Obletosaurus and Igai, as well as some other meaning. Obviously, those are a little bit different.
Yes. But still cool. And who knows, maybe paleontologists will find even more titanosaurs from this area.
Seems likely.
Yeah. Moving on to the other sauropod, this one's a dicraeosaurid, Tharosaurus indicus. It was published by Sunil Bajpai and others in Scientific Reports, and this one's also open access. Lucky us. Tharosaurus was the first ever dicraeosaurid from India, and dicraeosaurids are a group known for their relatively short necks and small body size for sauropods, and the spines along the neck and back. And that group includes Amargasaurus, to give you an idea of what they looked like.
Yeah, they've got those bifurcated neural spines, the sort of pair that comes up, in this case, up and through the skin, presumably, or maybe not through the skin, but, sticking up out of the regular neck shape, and maybe having sails in the case of Amargasaurus.
This particular dicraeosaurid lived in the Middle Jurassic in what is now Rajasthan, India. It was found in the Jaisalmer Formation. And it's the earliest known diplodocoid in the whole world.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Some other dinosaurs that lived around the same time and place were large theropods and turriosaur sauropods, but they're only known from teeth, so we don't know too much about them.
At least in this area.
Yes.
We know more than teeth elsewhere.
Yes. The new dinosaur is called, again, Tharosaurus indicus. The holotype includes vertebrae, neural spines, and a rib. And like Amargasaurus, it probably also had the bifurcated cervical neural spines on the neck spines. That's just based on its phylogeny, how it's been grouped.
Yeah, what it's related to.
The genus name Tharosaurus means Thar desert lizard, and it refers to where the fossils were found in western India, and the species name Indicus refers to India. There is not much to say about what this dinosaur looked like, but it's still an important find because it helps show more about sauropod diversity in what is now India and the origin of neosauropods. Neosauropods includes diplodocoids like Apatosaurus and Diplodocus, and macronarians like Patagotitan and Brachiosaurus.
They have all the most famous and I guess you'd say charismatic sauropods.
Popular.
If fossils can be charismatic.
Yeah. We don't know how charismatic they were in life.
Yeah.
And the authors wrote, quote, sauropods are considered to have originated in the late Triassic/early Jurassic, but the origin and radiation of Neosauropoda and its major clades, Diplodocoidea and Macronaria, are still amongst the most contentious issues, end quote.
Didn't know it was so contentious.
I didn't either, but I like it. I like all this talk about the sauropods. So until recently, East Asian Jurassic dinosaurs were considered to be endemic and isolated in their area. And then neosauropods came up in the early Cretaceous. But like I said, Tharosaurus is the oldest known diplodocoid around the world. And it's also a dicraeosaurid.
That's really interesting because I always think of dicraeosaurids as more far down the family tree and more derived, but definitely not.
No, well, dicraeosaurids lived in the Middle Jurassic to early Cretaceous. And there's a close relationship between Tharosaurus and later African and South American dicraeosaurids, which shows that it was probably relatively easy to move between India and Western Gondwana. Now, based on the age of Tharosaurus, which is Middle Jurassic, and it being a basal dicraeosaurid, the authors hypothesized that India is, quote, a potential center for the radiation and perhaps origin of dicraeosaurids/diplodocoids, end quote.
Yeah, if it's the oldest known one, you can't really beat that.
Yeah. And also, neosauropods seem to rise up in the late Early Jurassic to early Middle Jurassic time period. It's always confusing when you do late, early middle.
Yeah, that's weird. They're basically just saying the first half of the Jurassic.
So based on all this, it's possible that dinosaurs migrated from India and Asia through Western Gondwana and North America via Europe. But like with a lot of these things, we need more fossils to be sure.
Yep, because there might be another earlier one out there. Well, there almost certainly is another earlier one out there, but whether it's in India or not is a question.
whether it points to the origins of dicraeosaurids. All right, I've got a quick Ubirajara update as promised. The update is that the fossil went back to Brazil in June.
Nice. I thought we talked about that. Maybe we were saying that it was going to go back.
We were, but now it's been confirmed. It's there.
Okay, good.
That's why it's a quick update.
It made it. It didn't get lost in shipment like
Yes.
that other dinosaur we were talking about.
Yeah, and just real brief because we have covered this whole process, I think. It's the first dinosaur that was found in South America with feather-like structures, so it was a big deal. And it now has been handed over to Brazil's National Museum in Rio de Janeiro, which is being rebuilt, so that's good news.
Oh, I hadn't heard too much about them being rebuilt.
Yeah, me either.
After that big fire that destroyed it.
Yeah, in 2018, I believe. The German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock returned it during a visit to Brazil in early June, so...
Making some good diplomacy happen.
Yep.
Repatriating fossils.
It's back at home, and maybe it'll get restudied and renamed at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, because it did seem like, I don't know about the name, but the description immediately got a lot of flack for maybe their interpretation of those feather-like structures being not the most likely.
I think I've read, too, that it'll probably get renamed.
Interesting.
Since the paper got retracted.
There's still a lot of drama to come.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think the most dramatic parts are over.
Okay, that's good.
I've also got a couple bonus news items. I want to thank our listeners who alerted us to them. The first one's a little bit sad. It's that Gavin Leng, a fossil hunter known for discoveries such as Eotyrannus, recently passed away. He lived on the Isle of Wight and found tons of fossils. He discovered Eotyrannus when he was a teenager, and it was named after him in 2001 as Eotyrannus lungi. One person on the Isle of Wight County Press compared him to William Fox, who is known for discovering a lot of important dinosaurs in the 1800s.
Nice.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good comparison.
It does. I think he passed away at a relatively young age, unfortunately, but that is cool that he found so many great finds.
Yeah, it sounds that way. If he found the fossil, you said, as a teenager, and it got named in 2001. Yeah, that's sad.
But in happier news, if you're in London, you should check out the Brick Dinos exhibit at the Horniman Museum Gardens. There's a lot of cool models that I don't think you usually see. There's Mexicosaurus and Polacanthus, for example. The Polacanthus is almost 5 feet or 1.5 meter long. It's about 1/3 of its size in real life, which is impressive for bricks, or also known as Legos. I didn't see a picture, but I'm guessing it looks awesome with all the spiky armor.
Yeah, because ankylosaurs always look awesome.
Even in brick form. The exhibit's open until October 29th. It's a touring exhibit, so I'm hoping that it comes to the US at some point.
And in just a moment, we're going to get on to our Dinosaur Connection Challenge about cabinets of curiosity. But first, we're going to pause for a quick sponsor break. As promised, we've got a Dinosaur Connection Challenge.
A curiosity of sorts.
It's about cabinets of curiosity. And this Dinosaur Connection Challenge is again brought to you by Exquisite Eons. And this was a suggestion by them because they are huge paleontology fans and know how important cabinets of curiosity were to early dinosaur discoveries. And it's not something we've really talked much about on the show before. So I'm so glad they suggested this. So quick recap of cabinets of curiosity, if you're not familiar with them. They were basically the original natural history museums. You could think of them as like small private museums. They didn't just include natural history. There were lots of different categories of things, but of course we're going to focus on the natural history side of things because that's where the dinosaurs go.
And it was usually it was one person's cabinet.
Yeah, and so sometimes they were just a cabinet, but other times they were entire rooms, and that's because the word cabinet comes from a French word meaning a small room, and these were popular back when that's what cabinet still meant, basically. And this explains why the German name for a curiosity cabinet is a wonder room.
Oh, I like that. A wonder room.
It's a little more descriptive of what most curiosity cabinets, at least the famous ones, were actually like. It was more of like a room full of wonder than just a small cabinet full of some curiosities.
Reminds me of Aladdin. Room of wonder.
Oh, yeah, that's very true. It's not too different than the Cave of Wonders, I guess. So we don't know when the first curiosity cabinet was made, but the first known image of a curiosity cabinet is a 1599 engraving of a large room with all the walls and ceilings covered in interesting artifacts.
Cool.
The centerpiece, at least in the engraving that you can see, is a giant crocodile mounted in the middle of the ceiling.
What?
So the ceiling is just covered in animals, and then they sort of have like books and other stuff on the walls. But a lot of the most interesting stuff looks like they put it directly on the ceiling.
That's kind of like nowadays in the natural history museums when you get the big whale that's hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah, or a big dinosaur because, crocodilians are reptiles, and big impressive reptiles are usually a major part of natural history museums in the form of dinosaurs. Of course, crocodiles aren't dinosaurs, but they are really close relatives, and they're the closest living analog to dinosaurs in a lot of ways. So scientists do look at crocodiles a lot to figure out how dinosaurs might have behaved.
Crocodiles and birds are often coming up in studies.
Yep, those are the two closest. The image is from a book written by the Italian apothecary Ferrante Imperato, and the engraving is his own cabinet of curiosities. Presumably, he included it to sort of prove his credentials in a variety of scientific fields, because you can see like, oh, I've got my biology and anatomy section on the ceiling, and then on the walls I have, minerals to show that I'm a geologist, and over here I have my books about whatever else. So it is just basically a way of showing off his expertise. And when I saw all the bookshelves in there, and like they clearly look like nice books, I thought of Ron Burgundy with his "I'm very important. I have many leather-bound books" line. So that's sort of what this engraving seems to try to impart. But the 1599 engraving almost looks like a Where's Waldo book, just jammed full of different plants and animals. And so they're pretty hard to identify from the engraving. It does include, though, many dinosaurs in the form of birds.
All right.
So that means that this very first engraving ever of a curiosity cabinet includes dinosaurs. And the book is titled Del Historia Naturale, or Of Natural History, which basically you could think of it as one of the first natural history museum collections ever documented.
Yeah.
Although, of course, it was a private collection, but still. Curiosity cabinets were popular with many professional scientists serving the same function as museum collections and holotypes for comparing different species. So you could think of it like today when somebody is trying to compare a dinosaur bone to another existing dinosaur, they go to a museum and they compare. Sometimes they have to travel around the world. But back in the 16th, 17th century, a lot of these scientists just had a room in their house full of a lot of these specimens, and they could compare them at their leisure.
You'd have to know, though, that this person has a curiosity cabinet.
It would be their own curiosity cabinet that they were using. I guess they could share. Yeah, they could have a friend come over, and if you know they have that one bird, you could come over and check it out. Although, of course, it's not quite as precise as a holotype, and sometimes the labeling and the details of the individual specimens was a little bit confused, so that could be a problem. The monarchies in Europe also enjoyed curiosity cabinets. In France, they had a royal garden of medicinal plants starting from the early 1600s. And when Louis XV was 8 years old, and he had already been king for almost 3 years, although he had a regent and all that, but he still apparently proclaimed that the gardens would start including public lectures for botany, chemistry, and comparative anatomy.
That's impressive for an 8-year-old.
Well, apparently his tutors were into those subjects, so they probably had a little bit of influence on this, but it just makes me think, like, what 8-year-old boy today, if they were in charge of a country, wouldn't be like, and we're going to add dinosaurs to our museum because I want dinosaurs in my museum. So when he was 19 in 1729, they expanded that building in the garden. So the entire upper floor was a curiosity cabinet dedicated to natural history.
Wow.
And during the French Revolution, the collection was nationalized, and the National Museum of Natural History was founded in that building. So
Yeah.
that's today the National Museum of Natural History is that original cabinet of curiosities of natural history.
Which I think has happened to at least some cabinet of curiosities. They ended up getting donated to museums.
Yes. So some other examples, there's the Louvre was basically a art version of that story. Also, the British Museum was largely started out as a private collection, basically a cabinet of curiosities.
Mhm.
Curiosity cabinets were still popular 70 years later when Thomas Jefferson basically turned his entry hall in Monticello into a curiosity cabinet. And Jefferson and other amateurs would use those collections as talking pieces and to share their passions with friends.
I say we do the same thing. We don't quite have a cabinet worth of stuff yet, but we've still got time. But we have like our big Stegosaurus plate. That's a talking piece.
We just have it spread all around our house.
Yeah. I guess our house is a curiosity cabinet.
Kind of, yeah, of dinosaur stuff. And of course, because curiosity cabinets were collections of all sorts of interesting artifacts, fossils were often included, as well as stuffed taxidermied animals and all sorts of other, minerals and things like that. There's a 1619 painting which clearly includes fossil teeth, and they look like shark teeth to me, so that's probably what they were. There was also fossilized non-avian dinosaur remains in curiosity cabinets long before the word dinosaur even existed.
Yes, they came in handy later when we knew what dinosaurs were.
Yeah. So in 2002, Justin Dallaire and William Sargent wrote a paper titled The Earliest Discoveries of Dinosaurs, the Records Re-Examined in the Proceedings of the Geologists Association. So they consider the first authenticated find of a dinosaur bone to be in 1677 or earlier. So there may have been earlier discoveries in Egypt, Italy, China, Mongolia, Australia, or really anywhere else dinosaurs are found today. And there are hints about it, things that might have led to the legends of giant creatures like griffins or dragons or the emu god in Australia. But it's equally possible that they were inspired by giant bones from mammals like mammoths.
Right.
So we can't be certain that that was an actual find of a dinosaur bone. So that's why they consider this one the first authenticated one, because it's well documented. The first illustration of this bone is by Robert Plott in 1677.
Oh, we've talked about this bone.
We have. It's probably the bottom end of a Megalosaurus femur. It's the same bone that was for a time called scrotum humanum because of its resemblance to a certain male body part. And in a funny aside, that could be considered the senior ICZN official name for Megalosaurus. So Megalosaurus could be renamed Scrotum, but it probably won't be because it's basically a nomen dubium since that fossil was lost and it's not a super detailed or diagnostic picture. But it wasn't originally thought to be fossilized soft tissue. That was a later misinterpretation. It was actually thought to be from an animal and correctly identified as probably a femur. In 1677 is when Elias Ashmole dedicated his curiosity cabinet to the University of Oxford, giving the Ashmolean Museum its start. And it opened just 6 years later and is the oldest public museum in the UK. One really cool artifact from the original curiosity cabinet is the lantern Guy Fawkes used during the 1605 gunpowder plot.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then in 1677, Thomas Penniston donated the Megalosaurus femur piece to add to the collection. So without Ashmole's curiosity cabinet, we might not have ever seen that original Megalosaurus femur. In 1699, Edward Lloyd was in charge of the Ashmolean Museum and drew a bunch of teeth from the collection. It included what looks like a Megalosaurus tooth, which is still 125 years before Megalosaurus was named. Another tooth is, quote, surely the tooth of a cetiosaur, and as such represents the earliest record of any part of a sauropod skeleton.
That's cool.
That's from the 2002 paper. Yeah, so in this collection from possibly a curiosity cabinet, there was this sauropod tooth back in the 1600s. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, those teeth and the original Megalosaurus femur piece were lost centuries ago.
Oh.
So we sort of lost them to history, but we have many of these bones. It's not like we don't have other versions of these, and we have nice drawings of them, so the history is still well known.
Yeah, it's not completely lost.
Yeah. There's one more dinosaur bone that was definitely in a curiosity cabinet that I want to mention. It was in the collection of Smart Lethulier, who was, quote, an indefatigable collector of British fossils, which he amassed with a view to investigating their origins. These, which collectively excelled most other collections, filled 2 large cabinets, end quote.
And how big were these cabinets? Were they room-sized?
Apparently they were pretty big. He made beautiful illustrations of many of his fossils. One bone was illustrated with a label, large bone, uncertain of what animal, and it came from the same area as Megalosaurus, so it probably was a Megalosaurus rib. It was found in around 1754, but again, it's now lost.
Oh.
That bone might actually come from the same Megalosaurus that the holotype is, as might the other Megalosaurus bones I've mentioned, because they were all found in that same quarry over the span of many years.
That's really interesting to think about. That this dinosaur that was buried millions of years ago, and then it took a long time of getting like pieced out.
Yep.
Or pieces getting out of the ground.
And then even after they found it, it took well over 100 years before anybody named it.
Yeah.
Abbé Bachelet had a curiosity cabinet that Georges Cuvier examined, and his curiosity cabinet included the first documented dinosaur vertebrae.
Yeah, we've talked about that one.
Cuvier thought they were from a crocodile when he published them in 1808, but they were later recognized as Streptospondylus.
It's a good one.
Which is a theropod.
Mm-hmm.
It was a dinosaur of the day. That was the one I was thinking of in the back of my head when I was thinking Dinosaur Connection Challenge, because you mentioned it during the Dinosaur of the Day.
But at least a year ago, so good memory.
I remember some of this random stuff. But that leads us back to the sponsor of this segment, Exquisite Eons. They can help you start your own curiosity cabinet or add to it if you already have one.
Yeah, they've helped add to ours.
They have a brand new line of dinosaur figurines, including the steadfast Stegosaurus and the tenacious Triceratops, and soon to come is the adventurous Ankylosaurus. That it looks really cool.
Yes, well, and the Stegosaurus and Triceratops we've seen up close and personal, and they are amazingly detailed.
They are. They have really one-upped themselves on these. They're made out of bronze, and they're very scientifically accurate because they worked with Carrie Woodruff to get all the details in them right.
They're beautiful, and they look great, in your hand just holding them, but also on your desk or wherever you would put your curiosity cabinet.
Yeah, when you start your own curiosity cabinet.
Yeah, like the Triceratops is it the jugal horns, the spikes on the side of the cheeks?
Oh, yeah. And all the little epiossifications around the frill, and it even has the big bump, sort of like half softball size that were discovered in its skin.
Mm-hmm.
It looks so cool.
And the Stegosaurus has some really beautiful details too, like the lines on the plates.
Yeah, and they're alternating in the most current scientific understanding of how they looked. So I definitely recommend checking them out, and they're open for pre-orders too. Also, Exquisite Eon supports scientific research by donating a portion of the proceeds of every sale to AAAS, so you can support scientific research while building your own curiosity cabinet if you pick up these figurines. And thank you again to Exquisite Eons for sponsoring the segment and also encouraging us to talk about curiosity cabinets, which is long overdue.
Yes, thank you.
And if you haven't already, make sure you check them out at exquisiteeons.com.
And now on to our dinosaur of the day, Megapnosaurus, which was a request from Paleo Mike 716 and Porter Venador, so thank you. This dinosaur of the day also includes Syntarsus and to some extent Coelophysis. Don't worry, we'll get into it.
So I guess it's a coelophysoid.
Good guess, yes. Or good deduction, I should say.
Thanks.
We mentioned Megapnosaurus / Syntarsus briefly in episode 426 because there's a pair of them on display in a diorama at the Natural History Museum of Zimbabwe.
Oh yeah, that's how I knew that one.
Megapnosaurus, like you deduce, Garrett, it was a coelophysid theropod that lived in the early Jurassic in what is now Africa and possibly the US. Being a coelophysid, it looked like Coelophysis. It had a long tail, it walked on two legs, it had short arms, and a long face. And it is similar in shape and size to Coelophysis, small to medium sized. It's estimated to grow up to 7.2 feet or 2.2 meters long and weigh up to 29 pounds or 13 kilograms. It was lightly built and it was fast. And it had a large brain cavity, so it was probably intelligent, especially compared to other dinosaurs. Based on growth rings that have been found on some specimens, it lived maybe on average 7 years. And it may have been nocturnal. There were scleral rings found that look similar to modern nocturnal birds. It also had a weak joint in its jaw bones, which gave it a hooked premaxillary jaw, the tip of the snout.
It sounds very bird-like. It's got eyes that make it look nocturnal, and it's got this hook on the end of its beak.
Yeah. The hypothesis is that it was a scavenger because of that weak joint in the jaw bones. It couldn't go after live prey.
We've heard that proposed before and questioned sometimes because, not all prey struggles that much.
True. The name Megapnosaurus is still being debated, whether it's Megapnosaurus, Coelophysis, or a new genera completely. The genus name, Megapnosaurus, means big dead lizard.
I love that so much.
There's kind of two species. There's Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis and Megapnosaurus kyentekete. Again, some paleontologists consider Megapnosaurus to be synonymous with Coelophysis, but that is still being debated.
So then it could potentially be like Coelophysis rhodesiensis if they decide that it's, too close to get its own genus, but different enough to be its own species, or it could just get lumped in with a existing Coelophysis species. Won't know unless somebody publishes about it.
Yes. I'll start with Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis. Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis was found in the Elliott Formation in South Africa and the Forest Sandstone Formation in Rhodesia, which is now known as Zimbabwe. And makes sense why you can see one on display at the museum in Zimbabwe. Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis is estimated to be up to that 7.2 feet or 2.2 meters long and weigh up to 29 pounds or 13 kilograms. It's been described as lean and long with an S-shaped neck and long legs that looked like legs of birds, such as the secretary bird. And I loved looking up the secretary bird because it looks like it's walking on stilts.
It's very long legs. It's like flamingo-ish in terms of the legs.
But Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis had shorter arms and 4 fingers on each hand and a long tail. There's no evidence that it had feathers, but it's often portrayed that way because it looked so bird-like. The fossils were first found in 1963, and the holotype includes most of a well-preserved skeleton. It's only missing the skull and neck vertebrae. More fragments have also been found. Several specimens were found in 1985 in South Africa in the Elliott Formation, and 26 specimens were collected in Zimbabwe from the Forest Sandstone Formation in 1963, 1968, and 1972.
Wow. So we started out with a well-preserved skeleton, and then they found 25 more. That's crazy.
But yeah, it's amazing. So we know a fair amount. In terms of where it lived, the Elliott Formation probably was an ancient floodplain, and other dinosaurs that lived around the same time and place include sauropodomorphs like Mesospondylus and also ornithischians like Lassutosaurus and Heterodontosaurus. In the Forest Sandstone Formation, there were crocodiles, Mesospondylus, and indeterminate prosauropods. In 1972, Michael Roth found hundreds of bones from at least the 26 individuals from different growth stages. They included skulls and neck vertebrae as well as gut contents. Roth described the fossils in his thesis in 1977, and those fossils from that locality are now at the Queen Victoria Museum in Australia. Some healed fractures of the leg and feet have been found in Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis, and one specimen had signs in the sacral rib of fluctuating asymmetry, which might have been from living in stressful conditions. So some pathologies there. It's possible Megapnosaurus hunted in packs.
Because they found a bunch of them together, I guess.
Yeah, at different growth stages too. There's also some possible sexual dimorphism based on some individuals just being more robust with the large limbs and the large muscle attachments compared to some more gracile individuals that are smaller in size, and all of them are adults. But sexual dimorphism is very hard to know for sure about.
Yeah. Just like the scavenger versus predator thing, which is interesting because some people said that its jaw was too weak to be a predator and it was scavenger. And then others are saying it hunted in packs. So you can see how you can get to different conclusions by looking at the same bones.
Yes. Now, there's a lot of variable growth. Like some individuals are larger, but younger or more immature than smaller, mature adults. And it turns out this variable growth was likely common in earlier dinosaurs, but then later lost, like birds don't do it. That might have helped them, the early dinosaurs, adapt to harsh environments.
Yeah, that's not just Megapnosaurus. There's a lot of dinosaurs like that. And I wonder partly it could be birds don't do it because they grow so fast.
Yeah, could be. Could be a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, going into the name, originally Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis was named Syntarsus rhodesiensis by Michael Roth in 1969, based on the Zimbabwe or the Rhodesia fossils. But then in 2001, it was discovered that there was a beetle named Syntarsus. It was Syntarsus asperulus. So Ivy and others renamed Syntarsus rhodesiensis to Megapnosaurus in 2001. There is some controversy here, and we will get into it. In 2001, Michael Ivy and others, again, they named Megapnosaurus, and they combined Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis, again named by Roth in 1969, and Megapnosaurus kyantakate, which had been named at this point by Rowe. It was named in 1989. The Syntarsus name was already being used for a beetle, and that was named back in 1869 by Fairmare. Though two of the authors of Michael Ivy and others, including Michael Ivy, made Syntarsus a junior synonym of a different beetle, Cercanatus, in 1990, but still the name had already been used.
Yeah, that's a bummer. It's like if you use it, even if it's for a really scrappy fossil or it gets renamed or whatever, it's like, it's still preoccupied. Could be confusing to someone, so we can't reuse it.
Yeah.
Although some people have argued, like, really? Can beetles and dinosaur bones really get confused? But I guess to be on the safe side.
Right. And to be consistent with naming conventions.
Yeah, it's easier to search, for sure.
Now, according to Ivy and others, quote, this turn of events requires a new name, and although Syntarsus rhodesiensis is described inside the cover of the 1996 Volume 3 of the journal Syntarsus as a small carnivorous dinosaur, and although as good and loyal phylogeneticists, we understand that it was not really on the lizard lineage at the scale of an entomologist, because they were entomologists, it looks like a big dead lizard. So, in what may well be the first name for a dinosaur ever proposed in an entomological journal, we propose the replacement name Megapnosaurus, I quote.
So it was the entomologist that proposed the new name.
Big dead lizard, yes.
Oh, that's so funny.
They also wrote, quote, this moniker seems highly appropriate for this animal.
It's like beetle people saying, like, oh, that's just a big dead lizard. Who cares about it? It's the invertebrates striking back against the vertebrates.
I guess. I think they were trying to be a little funny about it.
They were funny. I appreciate the joke.
But again, there's debates on whether to lump Megapnosaurus into Coelophysis and then to make Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis a junior synonym, and it would become Coelophysis rhodesiensis. Gregory Paul, Michael Rath, and others agree that it should be lumped together and synonymized.
They don't want it to be Megapnosaurus, the big dead lizard.
Yeah.
I'd rather it was a type of Coelophysis.
Depending on who you ask, yeah, it's a preference versus other reasons. And if you want a refresher on Coelophysis, it was our dinosaur of the day in episode 204. Although it's a little outdated because I was looking at the notes and I had not looked too much into Megapnosaurus at that point.
Yeah, Coelophysis has been known for so long and from so many specimens. There's a lot to cover.
Yes. Now, there were a couple studies in 2018 by Barta and others and by Christopher Griffin that found enough differences to keep Coelophysis and Megapnosaurus separate. As an example, Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis doesn't have a fifth hand bone, the metacarpal, and Coelophysis bari does.
It's a pretty big difference.
Yes. There's also differences in scars, grooves, and depressions on the humerus and the femur, the arm and leg bones. And we will get more into all of these debates in Megapnosaurus in a moment, but first we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors. All right, now I'll move on to Megapnosaurus kyanticate.
That's a real tongue twister.
It is. I'm surprised I got that one that time. It did feel like I was stumbling a little bit. In 1989, Timothy Rowe described a second species of quote-unquote Syntarsus as Syntarsus kyanticate, based on a skull and parts of a skeleton. These fossils were found in the Kayenta Formation in Arizona in the U.S., and it lived in the early Jurassic.
That's what I figured.
That's how it got its name.
Yeah, Kayenta. I don't know about the Kate part.
I will get into that. But first, I want to talk about the Kayenta Formation. It had rivers and rainy summers and dry winters, and other dinosaurs that lived there include theropods like Dilophosaurus.
That's why I know it.
And Kayenta venador.
Huh.
Which was originally thought to be Syntarsus kyanticate / Megapnosaurus kyanticate, but there's enough differences for those to be separate.
Really nailing the kyanticate every time.
Getting some good practice. There's also the shake and bake theropod, which is an undescribed coelophysoid known from a partial skeleton, and it was found in 1978. There's a lot of small bones cemented together in a dense matrix because the fossils had washed down together.
That's what makes it shake and bake. That's
Yeah.
funny.
I like that nickname. And then you've got sauropodomorphs like Cerosaurus and Ankylosaurus, heterodontosaurs, and armored dinosaurs like Scelidosaurus and Scutellosaurus. And on the non-dinosaur side, other animals around the time and place included sharks, fish, frogs, turtles, lizards, pterosaurs, mammals, crocodilomorphs, mussels, and snails.
Sounds like a swamp.
Yeah, it does sound swampy. At least 16 individuals of Syntarsus / Megapnosaurus kyanticate have been found, fragmentary remains. These fossils were found between 1977 and 1979.
Wow, 16. So you not only is the one species really well known, both species are really well known.
Yeah. And the type specimen was a fully mature, robust adult. The holotype was distorted. Mostly the left side was preserved because it rested on its left side and was partially buried, but the right side, including the skull, was exposed to water currents.
So it sounds like it's decently complete, but a little bit messed up.
Yeah. Enough to get an estimate that Megapnosaurus or Syntarsus kyanticate was up to 8.2 feet or 2.5 meters long and weighed up to 66 pounds or 30 kilograms. So quite a bit bigger than Rhodesiensis.
Yeah, still pretty skinny though, it sounds like.
One big difference between Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis and Megapnosaurus kyanticate is that kyanticate had two small crests on its head, similar to Dilophosaurus but smaller.
Huh.
Going back to that species name, kyanticate, it refers to the Kayenta Formation, but also Dr. Kathleen Smith, who has the nickname Kayenta K because of her work in the Kayenta Formation, and that includes finding the type specimen of Megapnosaurus kyanticate.
So it's Kyanticate, Latinized into Kyanticate.
Yes.
So maybe it's Kyanticate.
Oh, could be. I don't know if I can switch my pronunciation at this point.
Yeah.
Now, whether you use the name Megapnosaurus or Syntarsus depends on who you ask. In 2000, Alex Downs compared Coelophysis bari and Syntarsus rhodesiensis and found them to be so similar that Syntarsus was a junior synonym to Coelophysis. He said there were only minor details in the neck length and other small differences. And I'm saying Syntarsus because this is the year before Megapnosaurus was named, so.
Gotcha.
In 2004, Anthea Bristow and Michael Roth synonymized Coelophysis and Syntarsus as well, based on work on a partially disarticulated skull of a juvenile Syntarsus specimen. They said, quote, that the recently proposed facetious replacement name for Syntarsus, Megapnosaurus, should not stand, end quote. And again, Michael Roth is the one that named Syntarsus. They found only minor differences and said that those differences could be because they lived at different times, like Coelophysis being in the late Triassic and Syntarsus in the early Jurassic. In 2017, Daniel Barta and others found differences in the hands of Coelophysis bari and Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis. There's that fifth metacarpal that I mentioned. In 2018, Christopher Griffin found Megapnosaurus to be valid. There were enough differences between the two, including that there were some characters that varied as Megapnosaurus grew that weren't found in Coelophysis, like a scar on the humerus and depressions on the femur, so things on the arms and legs. Though, they did say that most of the features that changed while growing during ontogeny were the same, and they were similar in size once they were fully grown. In 2020, Adam Marsh and Timothy Rowe kept the name Syntarsus rhodesiensis instead of using Megapnosaurus or Coelophysis, quote, because the systematic relationships of these animals within Coelophysoidea is in flux, end quote.
Seems like they should have just used Megapnosaurus then.
Well, in 2021, Ezker and others found that Syntarsus kyenticate was not closely related to Coelophysis bari or Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis, so that throws another wrench in there.
So they're basically trying to split a preoccupied one into Syntarsus kyenticate, and then you've got Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis. It's like, oh man,
it's a little bit messy.
That's extremely messy.
And then last year in 2022, Skye McDavid and Jeb Burgos found Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis to be the valid name.
Seems like there's a predominance of it being valid.
Yes, well, they kind of had, I would say it's valid with an asterisk, according to them. But like I was saying, there's controversy on the name change to Megapnosaurus and whether how it was changed was valid, because some sources said that it wasn't ethically done. According to the 2022 paper, quote, if a taxonomic name is invalid, preoccupied, or incorrectly formulated, then it is considered ethical to contact its original describer or describers to inform them of the problem so that they can correct their own error. If the original describer or describers are unreachable, for example, if they are deceased or do not respond to correspondence, then the person who learns of the error will typically publish a correction. Ivy attempted to contact Roth, but never received a reply. He and co-authors proceeded with publication of the replacement name after 2 years, and after being incorrectly told by dinosaur paleontologist John Jack Horner that Roth was deceased. End quote. So it sounds like there was some miscommunication, and they thought maybe the original namer wasn't even around to be contacted.
Mm-hmm.
The paper also said, quote, the genus Megapnosaurus is here considered to be likely distinct from Coelophysis, but in need of further research. End quote. That's why I say with an asterisk here.
Yeah, I mean, I could see being annoyed by a different branch of scientists entirely basically making fun of your find, naming it like that. But it is a hilarious name, so I still enjoy it.
Yeah. I don't think they were necessarily making fun of it, but, well...
They were.
It was... Big Dead Lizard does sound funny.
Yeah. Especially with comparison to beetles and other invertebrates.
Yeah.
Everything's big.
Anyway, this latest paper found Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis to be correct, but for now, but said that it could possibly be a junior synonym and, quote, usage of the name Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis is recommended. Usage of the name Coelophysis rhodesiensis is neither recommended nor discouraged. Usage of the name Syntarsus rhodesiensis is discouraged, end quote.
For sure, because Syntarsus is a different animal, so you can't be using Syntarsus, even though it was synonymized and blah, blah, blah. It's just, no.
Yeah, so ruling out Syntarsus, but not completely ruling out Coelophysis.
Yep.
They also found that Syntarsus kyenticate is most likely its own genus, and they recommend it be provisionally referred to as Megapnosaurus, in quotes, kyenticate, quote, with quotation marks indicating a problematic genus assignment until a new genus is formally described for this species, end quote. Which is why I was saying it's kind of a question mark that there are two species here.
Mm-hmm. Or you can do the super weird thing and call one Syntarsus, which you shouldn't be using at all, and the other one Megapnosaurus.
Yeah. But maybe we'll just get a new name sometime in the near future.
That seems wise.
There are other fossils that have been found that may be Megapnosaurus, or they used to be considered Megapnosaurus/Syntarsus. Darlington Muniqua and Michael Roth describe part of a Megapnosaurus/Syntarsus snout that was found in the Elliott Formation in South Africa, but this one is now known as Dracovenidor. Several coelophysoid bones have been found in Mexico from the early Jurassic that were described as, quote, Syntarsus, quote, mexicanum, but they weren't properly described, and they're probably from an indeterminate coelophysoid. Scientists referred a theropod specimen from Wales to Syntarsus, but as an unknown species. And then in 2021, that was later named Pendrag, which we talked about in episode 360.
That's kind of a fun name. I
Yeah.
remember that one.
Me too. In 2004, Randall Ermis reported fossils of Megapnosaurus found in the Lufeng Formation in China from the early Jurassic, 2 specimens found. And if that is Megapnosaurus, that would mean that Megapnosaurus was also in Asia.
Oh, that's messy. Give it a new genus. I mean, I guess Coelophysis is a really late Triassic, early Jurassic dinosaur, so things were pretty well connected back then. But even then, it's unlikely and pretty rare to get those genus that far apart.
Well, we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. And our fun fact of the day is that dicraeosaurids are not unique for their bifurcated neural spines.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it turns out you can find them in several places in the animal kingdom. And as a quick reminder, neural spines are the bumps you can feel on your back when you bend over, or you can feel on other people's backs. Our vertebrae and most animals have just one bony projection up out of the back. I'll have a little bit more on that later. That's not exactly correct, but for the most part, some animals have a pair of spines or a single neural spine split into 2, aka bifurcated. That's what the bifurcated and bifurcated neural spines means. But in addition to dicraeosaurids, many other sauropods had these split neural spines, although most of them presumably were inside a more regular-looking neck, not sort of projecting up out of the neck and then covered in skin into a sail like we currently think of a Margosaurus.
Which is why a Margosaurus is so cool.
Yes. And most of them are much shorter, obviously, too, than a Margosaurus and Bajatosaurus. In 2014, Carrie Woodruff reported on a bunch of animals that also have bifurcated neural spines. A couple examples of early animals with bifurcated neural spines are the Permian reptile Lepidosaurus, and the early amphibian Eriops. Other extinct dinosaurs, which include these bifurcated neural spines, are Stegosaurus, Miragaia, Carnotaurus, Ostroraptor, the dodo bird.
Yeah, that is an extinct dinosaur.
And others. So it spans, obviously, lots of different groups of animals. You've got, ornithischians as well as theropods in the mix, in addition to those sauropods. With modern animals, there are dinosaurs today, too, specifically ratites like the ostrich. There's also the Ankoli-Watusi cattle. Their horns can weigh up to 90 kilograms or 200 pounds.
Oof.
So maybe it helps them sort of support that weight. And technically humans as well. Our C2 vertebra in our neck, aka the axis, is a little bit bifurcated. So we have a bifurcated neural spine.
What?
Maybe just one. I'm not positive that there aren't any others in the vertebral column. I tried looking for them, but it's so slightly bifurcated on our axis that I'm not 100% confident there isn't another one. I only found people referencing the C2 vertebra, though.
Okay.
Certainly not all of our vertebrae. Last but not least, the subject of our next episode of I Know Paleo, Smilodon, aka the saber-toothed tiger, also had at least some bifurcated neural spines.
Ooh. Guess you'll have to join our Dino-It-All community to find out more about that one.
Yep.
What
Little tease.
What a fun teaser. That wraps up this episode of I Know Dino. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned because next week we'll be starting a mini-series all about dinosaur soft tissue.
Yeah, talking about things like skin, feathers, all that other non-bone stuff that very occasionally fossilizes.
Yes. Been toying around with the name Beyond the Bones.
Oh, I like that.
Ooh, good. So keep an ear out. And if you enjoy our show, then please share with a friend. Thank you for listening, and until next time.
Could tell from watching me walk, I'm a dinosaur.